So Rob gave me this question about should feedback change based on a student's level or their goals? And the short answer for this is yes, I think that it should. And obviously I want to give you some more information about that. So what I think of when I focus on this idea of feedback is a sort of a definition, I guess. I mean, what I'm talking about with this, and I'm guessing what Rob meant by this, is feedback is like error correction, basically. And it may be your or the teacher's answer to how is my speaking, how am I doing? I don't know about you guys, I get that question a lot from my students. Do you guys get people to, like, do your students ever ask you, how am I doing? How's my speaking? Something like that. And it's pretty vague, you know, like it doesn't always, you know, it's a really big question. And so it can be hard to answer that. But, you know, what I mean by feedback is how I may answer that question and how I focus on things with my students. So just before I give you the details of what I would recommend that you do, what I do with my students, I wanted to give you a little bit of background just about me and who I am. So I got my CELTA in 2008, and I've been teaching full-time ever since then. In 2014, I started getting my Delta certificate, and because I've moved a lot in the last 18 months, I haven't been able to continue that, but I am still working on it. And over the years, I've taught general English, business English, and a lot of exam preparation for TOEFL IBT, specifically the speaking section, and pronunciation, and things like accent work. So a lot of my students are very, very focused on measurable big changes in their level of English. And so they're always asking me this question, how am I doing? How's my English? And so every day that I'm working with students, I'm giving them feedback. And it's really important for the students who I work with, and I'm guessing for you guys as well, to be thinking about what your students' goals are. So what I'm going to recommend to you as a way to give really targeted feedback to your students. Ooh, let's see if I can just change this, sorry. Yeah, okay, here we go. All right, is that, all right, let me just center this, hang on. Okay, so my first tip for you, if you can see that there, is to get your student to articulate their goals for using English or for improving. And don't stop if they answer, I want to have better English, because a lot of people say that, but it doesn't really mean very much. It's very difficult to help someone have better English. What does that really mean? So I recommend that you keep digging to find out what their deeper motivation and goal for learning is. And as much as possible, get really clear on what I'm going to put down here for you, which is about fluency or accuracy of, you know, grammar, vocabulary usage, and things like that, or do they want a balance of the two? Because depending on what your students' goals are and what they really care about, or what they need for their job, or for a presentation that they're going to give, or an interview that they're going to go to, or a vacation that they're going to take, or, you know, some conversation that they're going to have with an English-speaking family member, or something like that. Depending on what their goal is, you need to know that, because it's definitely going to affect what kind of feedback you're giving to the person. So, and it changes completely based on the student. So, I mean, I think it's not good to assume that, you know, we know what they want. I mean, this is a conversation that I have with my students, and I suggest that you really have that very actively with your students to find out what's important to them, you know, and make sure that you know that, because it may not be the same. Every student could have different goals and different needs. So that's the first thing that I would suggest. And the other thing that, like after you know that information, the next thing that I start doing is I start gathering their mistakes that correspond to what their goals are. doesn't want to let me type the letter 2. Okay, all right, so, start gathering these real examples, and you want to introduce the problem that they've got, whatever that error is that they're making, and I really suggest that you use their real examples of errors, and because by using your students' own words, their real English, you get their attention in a very, very different way. So I don't recommend that you give feedback or error correction that's not connected to what they're actually doing. I don't know about you guys, you've probably all had a similar situation. When I was living in Turkey, I used to take Turkish lessons, and I had a tutor for a short period of time who ultimately I stopped working with her because of this problem. Like, she used to tell me that I would make mistakes. And it was really general feedback. And I used to ask her, when did I do it? How did I do it? Where was it? Because as the learner, I needed the context of my own sentence, my own frame of reference, my own understanding of why I used it. I needed to know where I said it. And she could never tell me when I used that as a mistake. And so for me, it was very confusing. Like, if I don't even know where the problem really is, if I don't know where I'm making an error, how am I going to fix it? So that experience that I had as a student really changed how I interact with my students. And when I'm talking with them, I always use real examples. So I just, I keep notes that I'm taking really quickly. I don't write the whole sentence that they say, but I have a short phrase, and I'm able to reconstruct what they were talking about. And then that way they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, I did that. That's true. And there's no argument. Like, they know that it's there, So I think it's important to do that so that you can show them and really help them understand, what the issue is. Another thing that I feel is really, really important before you start working with students and you get through a lot of lessons, I definitely suggest that you agree on some rules for how to correct errors. This is kind of going back to Cecilia's presentation just a little bit ago, where we understand what the focus is. Like, you need to know how you're going to give the feedback to somebody. And so I suggest that you ask your student what they prefer. For example, you could give them delayed feedback at the end of the lesson, or maybe halfway through the session. You have a natural breaking point and you give them some feedback later, or possibly they want immediate feedback. And again, I think that we should check with each student, and I think it's really important not just to make an assumption. Because everybody is different, every learner is different, and especially when you are giving private lessons, it's a personalized experience, and so you want to check and make sure that that you know what they prefer, so that you can give them what's going to help them the best. And sometimes they may not know what they want, and it can help to start a conversation where you talk about your teaching style a little bit. But I have found that this conversation, and it can, you only need like 5 minutes for it maybe, but that conversation can have a really huge impact on how quickly somebody makes progress or not. So that's the next thing that you definitely want to do. Next thing that I would suggest, when giving feedback, you need to have some kind of ground rules for it. Cecilia was talking about this a second ago, and she was saying that it was the focus. And I'm just moving that smiley face up there. I don't know what that smiley face is, but thank God. Who put that there? I don't think it was me, but okay. But the next thing that you want to do when you give feedback is to prioritize the feedback that you give. And I would say that you want to use some kind of external, maybe neutral criteria for that. Exams have always got some sort of speaking rubric, like IELTS and TOEFL IBT give you things that you can think about, like how the student's talking, accent, grammar, vocabulary, coherence, things like that. So I would use some of these, even if you are not actually teaching for that exam, you can borrow some of their criteria. And that's what I would suggest when you are doing that. All right, Rob, I'm done.